I'm Ruby, 57 years old, and after 30 years of marriage, my husband Brad ended everything with a single text message. I'm leaving you for my 21-year-old girlfriend and moving to Florida. I've already drained our joint account, haha. My hands were shaking, but I simply replied, good luck. He thought he'd left me broken and penniless, celebrating his new life with my money. He had absolutely no idea what was coming his way. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my ex-husband's betrayal, let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that like button if you believe karma always finds its way back around. I met Brad Harmon at the county courthouse in Chicago, where I worked as a paralegal. I was 27, ambitious and independent, with dreams of eventually going to law school myself. Brad was 32, a handsome attorney with confident blue eyes and an easy smile that could charm anyone in the room. He was representing a client in a civil case I was helping prepare documents for. You're the most thorough paralegal I've ever worked with, he told me after our third professional interaction. My firm could use someone with your attention to detail. It wasn't just a line. Brad truly appreciated my work ethic and intelligence back then. He asked me out for coffee, which turned into dinner, which blossomed into a whirlwind romance. Within 6 months, we were engaged, and by the following spring, married in a beautiful ceremony with 200 guests. The early years were everything I dreamed a marriage could be. We rented a small apartment in Lincoln Park, worked long hours during the week, and spent weekends exploring Chicago or driving to Michigan's beautiful shores. Brad was ambitious but kind, determined but considerate. We were true partners, supporting each other's dreams and building what we thought would be an unbreakable foundation. You and me against the world, Ruby, he'd say when challenges arose. We're unstoppable together. When Brad was offered a junior partnership at Preston, Williams & Stone, one of Chicago's prestigious corporate law firms, we celebrated with champagne and dreams of the future. The position came with longer hours and more responsibility, but the financial rewards were substantial. We bought our first home in Oak Brook, a beautiful suburb with excellent schools. Then came the conversation that would ultimately shape the next 30 years of my life. Ruby, this partnership is going to demand everything I've got, Brad explained one evening. The travel, the client dinners, the networking events. I need someone managing our home life completely so I can focus entirely on the firm. What are you saying exactly? I asked, already sensing where this was headed. I think you should consider stepping back from your career, just temporarily, he added quickly. Once I'm established as a partner, you can go back to work, maybe even go to law school like you've always wanted. It wasn't an easy decision. I loved my work and the financial independence it provided, but I also believed in Brad and our partnership. After weeks of discussion, I agreed to put my career on hold, believing it was a temporary sacrifice for our greater good. Our daughter Megan was born a year later, followed by our son Jason 2 years after that. The temporary career pause stretched into years of a full-time motherhood and managing our increasingly busy household. Brad's career flourished. He became a full partner by 40, specializing in corporate mergers and acquisitions, working with Fortune 500 companies, and earning a reputation as a fierce negotiator. Behind every successful man is an even more capable woman. Brad would toast at dinner parties in our increasingly luxurious home. Guests would smile approvingly at the sentiment while I served the perfect meals, wore the perfect clothes, and played the perfect corporate wife. But temporary turned into permanent. Whenever I broached the subject of returning to work or pursuing law school, there was always a reason to postpone. Megan needed help with college applications. Jason was struggling in calculus. Brad had important clients coming to dinner. The firm was in the middle of a major case. I told myself it was fine. We had a beautiful home in an exclusive neighborhood, took luxury vacations twice a year, and had put away substantial savings for our retirement and the kids' education. I served on charity boards, managed our social calendar, and maintained our image as the perfect family. If I occasionally felt invisible or unfulfilled, I pushed those feelings aside, focusing instead on gratitude for our comfortable life. As the years passed, subtle changes crept into our relationship. Brad's compliments about my intelligence or capabilities disappeared, replaced by critiques of my appearance or commentary about how I couldn't possibly understand the complexities of his work. The man who had once valued my legal mind now treated me like an intellectually inferior domestic employee. "Ruby, you've put on a few pounds, don't you think?" He'd comment casually while I prepared dinner. "This gravy is a bit lumpy. Couldn't you have been more careful?" "That's not how it works, Ruby. The legal issues are complicated. You wouldn't understand." Each comment stung, but I'd internalized the role of supportive wife so completely that I simply tried harder. I dyed the first gray hairs, joined a stricter gym routine, took cooking classes, and smiled through the growing emotional distance. When the children left for college and eventually started their own adult lives, the emptiness in our marriage became impossible to ignore. Brad spent more time at the office or on business trips that required no explanation. I maintained our home and social obligations, increasingly feeling like a prop in his successful life rather than a partner. 6 months before everything fell apart, the subtle shifts in Brad's behavior became impossible to ignore. At 59, he suddenly became obsessed with his appearance, buying designer clothes, getting expensive haircuts, and joining a new exclusive gym. His phone became a closely guarded possession, and he started taking calls in another room. The business trips increased in frequency, often extended by a day or two, with vague explanations. "Brad, is everything okay between us?" I asked one night after another silent dinner. "Why wouldn't it be?" he replied, without looking up from his phone. "Just because I'm not entertaining you with conversation every minute doesn't mean something's wrong. I've had a long day, Ruby. Not everything is about you." I tried to believe him. I tried to ignore the unfamiliar cologne. I occasionally detected the late-night text notifications, the weekend emergency client meetings. After 30 years of marriage, I couldn't bring myself to voice my suspicions. Instead, I held onto the hope that we were simply going through a phase, that the man I'd built a life with wouldn't betray decades of commitment. I was wrong. So terribly, devastatingly wrong. The morning that destroyed 30 years of marriage started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 5:30, made coffee, and began preparing Brad's favorite breakfast of avocado toast with poached eggs and crispy bacon. He had an important client meeting, and I wanted to send him off well-fed and ready to conquer the day. My phone chimed with a text message at 6:15. Assuming it was Megan sending pictures of our new granddaughter, as she often did in the morning, I smiled as I picked up my phone. The smile froze on my face as I read the message from Brad. "I'm leaving you for my 21-year-old girlfriend and moving to Florida. I've already drained our joint account, haha. Your credit cards won't work either. Movers coming for my stuff Friday. Figure out your own life now." My hand shook so violently that I nearly dropped the phone. I had to sit down as a wave of dizziness washed over me. I read the message again, and then a third time, unable to process the casual cruelty of those words, ending 3 decades of marriage. 21 years old. His girlfriend was younger than both our children. "I've already drained our joint account, ha-ha." That mocking ha-ha pierced my heart like a physical wound. Somehow, operating on autopilot, I managed to type and send a 2-word response: "Good luck." Then I collapsed at the kitchen table, our sunny breakfast nook suddenly feeling cold and foreign. The eggs continued cooking, eventually setting off the smoke detector, but I couldn't move. My entire body felt weighted down my chest so tight I could barely breathe. When I finally managed to stand, I moved mechanically to my laptop to check our accounts. The joint checking and savings accounts that had held $157,000 now showed a balance of $13.28. Brad had transferred everything out 2 days earlier. With trembling fingers, I tried to log into our investment accounts, only to discover all the passwords had been changed. I grabbed my wallet and pulled out my credit cards, then called the toll-free number on the back of one to check the balance. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harmon, but this card has been canceled by the primary account holder." Primary account holder. Despite contributing to our household for 30 years, I was merely a secondary user on accounts bearing my name. Panic rose like a tidal wave. How would I pay the mortgage, buy groceries, keep the utilities on? The next discovery was even more shocking. Searching for documents in Brad's home office, I found paperwork indicating he had sold our vacation cabin in Michigan 3 months earlier. The cabin we'd owned for 20 years, where we'd spent countless summers with the children, sold without a word to me. Looking around the office more carefully, I noticed empty spaces on shelves where certain possessions had been. His grandfather's antique watch, the signed baseball from the Cubs World Series win, photo albums from his childhood. He'd been systematically removing important items for weeks. The room began to spin, and for the first time in my life, I experienced a panic attack. My heart raced. I couldn't catch my breath, and darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. Somehow, I managed to call my younger sister Claire. "Ruby, what's wrong? You sound terrible." Claire's concerned voice came through the phone. "He's gone," I gasped. "Brad left me, by text, for someone younger than Megan. He took all our money." "Don't move. I'm coming over right now," Claire said firmly. Claire arrived 20 minutes later, using her emergency key to enter when I couldn't make myself answer the door. She found me still sitting on the floor of Brad's office, clutching the cabin's sale documents, struggling to breathe. "That absolute bastard," Claire muttered as she read the text message on my phone. "I always knew he was selfish, but this is a new low even for him." Claire had never particularly liked Brad, something she'd kept mostly to herself, out of respect for me. As a divorcee herself, though under less dramatic circumstances, she knew exactly what practical steps needed to be taken immediately. "First, we document everything," she said, slipping into crisis management mode. "Take screenshots of the bank accounts, the text message, everything. Then we call a lawyer. Today." I nodded numbly, allowing her to guide me through those first critical hours. The rest of that day passed in a blur of tears, phone calls, and desperate attempts to understand how 30 years of my life had vanished in a single text message. That night, lying alone in our king-sized bed, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house, every distant sound had me jerking awake, irrationally hoping it might be Brad coming home to say it had all been a terrible mistake. By morning, shock had begun to give way to something else, a slow, simmering anger. This man had convinced me to give up my career and independence. He had gradually isolated me from friends who weren't our kind of people. He had subtly chipped away at my confidence for years, and now he had discarded me like an outdated appliance, taking the financial security I'd helped build through decades of supporting his career. As I showered and dressed that morning, I made two critical decisions. First, I would not call Brad begging for explanations or reconciliation. His text had revealed his true character, and no conversation would undo that knowledge. Second, I would fight. Somehow, some way, I would not allow him to leave me destitute after 30 years of marriage. I just had no idea yet how that fight would ultimately unfold. The morning after receiving Brad's text with my sister Claire's support, I did something I hadn't done in almost 30 years. I reached out to Judith Winters, my former colleague from my paralegal days, and now a senior partner at Morrison & Klein, one of Chicago's top family law firms, and coincidentally, a major competitor to Brad's firm. "Ruby Harmon," Judith exclaimed warmly when I entered her office later that day. "It's been far too long." The warmth in her voice crumbled my fragile composure. I had arrived determined to be professional, but as soon as Judith embraced me, I broke down in tears. "I'm sorry," I sobbed as she guided me to a chair and closed her office door. "This isn't how I planned to reconnect." "Don't apologize. Just tell me what's happened," she said, her expression shifting from friendly to concerned. I showed her the text message and explained the financial situation. The drained accounts, the canceled credit cards, changed passwords, and secretly sold vacation property. Judith's face darkened with each new detail. "This is beyond outrageous, Ruby. It's financial abandonment and possibly fraud. And to do it by text after 30 years of marriage, I've seen some callous behavior in my career, but this ranks among the worst. She didn't hesitate. I'm taking your case personally pro bono, and I'm pulling in our best forensic accountant and divorce team. I can't ask you to do that, I protested. Once I get access to some funds I can pay. Consider it payback for all the times you saved me when we worked together, Judith insisted. Besides, nothing would give me greater professional satisfaction than making Brad Harmon face consequences for this behavior. Our firms have crossed paths many times, and his reputation for arrogance is well known. As we talked further, Judith helped me realize something critical. I had knowledge and resources that Brad didn't think I'd use. You worked in legal support for years before your marriage, Judith reminded me. You understand documentation, evidence, and procedure better than most of my clients, and you've been managing your household while Brad built his career. You likely know more about his business than he realizes. Her words sparked something in me. She was right. For years, I'd maintained Brad's calendar-planned dinners with his clients, listened to his work calls in our home, and organized his files when he worked there. I'd overheard countless conversations about cases and clients. I'd helped him practice presentations and speeches. I knew names, dates, relationships, and possibly questionable practices he never thought I'd paid attention to. Ruby, Judith asked carefully, during your marriage, did you ever observe or hear anything that might suggest ethical concerns in Brad's practice? Anything that made you uncomfortable? I thought back to snippets of conversations, to files I'd glimpsed, to late-night calls Brad took in his office when he thought I was asleep. There were things, I admitted slowly. Comments about billing practices that seemed excessive. Discussions about information obtained from competing firms. References to offshore accounts for certain clients that seemed unusual. Judith nodded thoughtfully. We won't use any of that yet, but knowing it exists gives us leverage. First, we need to document the financial abandonment and secure temporary support for you. She made several calls, assembling a team that included a forensic accountant, a private investigator, and 2 additional divorce attorneys who specialized in high-conflict cases. Go home and look for any financial documents you can find, Judith instructed. Old tax returns, investment statements, anything with account numbers or financial institutions listed. Also check if Brad kept any files at home related to his work. That evening, I searched our home with new purpose. In the back of Brad's closet behind golf clubs he rarely used, I discovered a locked file box I'd never seen before. Claire helped me pry it open, revealing a trove of document statements from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, paperwork for a condominium in Tampa purchased 3 months earlier, and handwritten notes about transferring assets that included the notation "before telling R." I photographed everything and sent the images to Judith, then continued searching. Years of managing our home meant I knew every inch of the house better than Brad did. Behind the basement drywall, where we'd had plumbing work done years ago, I found another waterproof document case containing additional financial records and a thumb drive. The thumb drive contained spreadsheets tracking deposits to accounts I'd never known existed, dating back 5 years. Brad had apparently been diverting funds systematically, preparing for this moment long before I had any inkling our marriage was ending. When Brad finally called 2 days after his text, I was prepared. Judith had coached me to record the conversation legal in Illinois with one-party consent and to let him talk as much as possible. "So you're alive after all," Brad said when I answered, his tone smug. "Figured out your new reality yet?" "I'm adjusting," I replied neutrally, activating the recording app as instructed. "Look, the house will need to be sold. My attorney will contact you about that. You should start looking for an apartment you can afford and whatever job you can get at your age. You really planned this thoroughly," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Of course I did. I'm an attorney, Ruby. Did you think I'd leave anything to chance? Everything of value is protected. The money, the investments, even my pension is shielded through the firm's partnership structure. What about our 30 years together, the life we built?" He laughed, actually laughed. "Let's be honest. I built that life. You just kept house, which 20-something waitress could have done. Speaking of which, Brittany sends her regards. You really believe you deserve everything after I gave up my career to support yours. That was your choice, Ruby. Nobody forced you to become dependent. I earned every penny through my talent and hard work. Why should I give half to someone who contributed nothing to my success? Every word was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, but also powerful evidence of his mindset and intentions. By the time the call ended, Brad had unknowingly provided damning statements about his deliberate financial abandonment and his dismissal of 3 decades of marital contributions. This is exactly what we needed, Judith said when I played the recording for her the next day. His arrogance will be his downfall. With my paralegal background, I threw myself into building our case. I created detailed timelines of Brad's career developments alongside my contributions as his spouse. I documented every client dinner hosted in our home, every weekend sacrificed to his work needs, every school event I attended alone because he was working. I assembled records of our financial growth throughout the marriage, highlighting how my management of our household had enabled his complete focus on career advancement. I detailed the market value of the services I'd provided: housekeeper, personal chef, event planner, child care provider, and unofficial legal assistant. Most damaging for Brad, I documented instances where I'd observed potentially unethical billing practices, including times I'd overheard him discussing charging clients for hours not actually worked or using information obtained through questionable methods. We won't lead with the ethical concerns, Judith explained. That's our nuclear option if he fights dirty. First, we file for emergency temporary support based on financial abandonment. 3 weeks after Brad's text, we filed divorce papers that would blindside him just as thoroughly as he had blindsided me. The family fallout from Brad's abandonment hit me in waves. Telling our adult children about their father's actions was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Mom, I'm coming home right now, Megan declared when I finally gathered the courage to call her 3 days after Brad's text. My daughter, now 28 and living in Seattle with her husband and new baby, was furious. I can't believe Dad would do something so cruel. And with someone my age, it's disgusting. Jason, our 25-year-old son, who had always idolized his father, reacted with stunned disbelief. There must be some mistake. Dad wouldn't just walk away from our family. The pain in his voice broke my heart all over again. I wish it weren't true, honey. But he made his decision very clear. Brad, meanwhile, was working his own angle with the children. He sent them expensive gifts and tear-filled explanations about how he'd been trapped in an unfulfilling marriage and had found true love for the first time. He painted himself as the victim of an emotional prison rather than a man who had systematically planned to abandon and financially devastate his wife of 30 years. Jason initially maintained contact with his father, struggling with divided loyalty. He says he'll still pay for my graduate school, Mom, and that he wants me to meet Brittany because we'd actually have a lot in common. The thought of my son being manipulated to accept his father's 21-year-old girlfriend as some sort of peer made me physically ill, but I bit back my true feelings. You're an adult, Jason. Your relationship with your father is separate from what's happening between him and me. Just be careful about getting caught in the middle. When the kids discovered Brittany was only 7 years older than Jason, the dynamic shifted. As Megan put it bluntly during one of our family therapy sessions, she could literally have been in high school with my brother. It's predatory and pathetic. Those therapy sessions became a crucial lifeline. Dr. Levine, a family counselor specializing in divorce trauma, helped us navigate the complex emotions of Brad's betrayal. Each of you will process this differently, she explained in our first group session. There's no right way to feel, and your healing won't follow the same timeline. For the first month, I maintained a facade of strength, focusing on practical matters and legal preparations. I didn't want my children to worry about me more than they already were. But after 4 weeks of running on adrenaline and determination, I crashed. It happened during a simple moment. I was sorting through photos for a project Judith had suggested to document our family history for the divorce proceedings. A picture of Brad holding newborn Jason fell from the album, and something inside me shattered. Claire found me an hour later curled on the floor, surrounded by scattered photographs, sobbing uncontrollably. I gave him everything. I wept as she held me. 30 years of my life, and he threw it away with a text message and a laughing emoji. That breakdown became a turning point. After finally allowing myself to feel the full magnitude of the loss, I could begin to rebuild. Dr. Levine helped me recognize the patterns of emotional manipulation that had gradually eroded my self-confidence throughout my marriage. What you're describing are classic tactics of emotional abuse, she explained during one of our individual sessions. The criticism, the isolation from friends, the dismissal of your intelligence and contributions. These weren't random behaviors, Ruby. They were a systematic dismantling of your independence and self-worth. With this new clarity, I made a symbolic break from my old identity. I booked an appointment at an upscale salon and replaced my conservative shoulder-length brown hair, maintained exactly as Brad preferred for 20 years, with a stylish silver bob that framed my face beautifully. Ruby, you look amazing, Claire gasped when she saw me afterward. I can actually see you again, not Brad's version of you. The external change reflected an internal shift. I reconnected with college friends Brad had deemed too liberal or not sophisticated enough. I joined a support group specifically for women going through divorce after long-term marriages. I started journaling daily, documenting not just the divorce proceedings, but my emotional journey from devastation to determination. As the legal process advanced, practical changes became necessary. Our 5-bedroom suburban home, once a showcase for entertaining Brad's colleagues and clients, now felt like an empty museum of a failed marriage. After consultation with Judith, I decided to sell it and find something that represented this new chapter. I found a charming townhouse in a vibrant urban neighborhood, walkable to shops and cafes, with a small garden perfect for container plants and morning coffee. The day I signed the rental agreement, I felt a surprising lightness. This place had no memories of Brad, no ghosts of our marriage haunting the corners. The process of downsizing forced me to evaluate what truly mattered. Family photos, my grandmother's quilt books, I'd loved my personal mementos all came with me. Brad's forgotten possessions, the ones he hadn't deemed important enough to take immediately, became collateral damage of his hasty exit. He left these golf clubs that cost $3,000, I told Claire, as we organized a garage sale, and this whiskey collection he spent years assembling. Sell it all, Claire advised. He clearly valued his girlfriend and Florida condo more than these things. The garage sale became unexpectedly cathartic. Each item sold felt like shedding another piece of the life that had collapsed around me. The proceeds, nearly $7,000 in cash, became my first independent financial resource since Brad had drained our accounts. With a temporary home secured and some emergency funds in hand, I turned toward rebuilding my professional identity. After 28 years out of the workforce, the prospect was terrifying, but my work with Judith had rekindled my love for legal processes. You still have incredible skills, Judith encouraged when I mentioned looking for work. Let me make some calls. The first job interview in nearly 3 decades was nerve-wracking. I sat in the reception area of Williams & Associates, a medium-sized law firm specializing in estate planning, fidgeting with my portfolio and fighting waves of inadequacy. Mrs. Harmon, the office manager greeted me. We're excited to meet you. Judith Winters speaks very highly of your organizational abilities and attention to detail. The interview went better than I could have imagined. My life experience combined with my previous paralegal training and my recent crash course in high-conflict divorce proceedings made me an attractive candidate despite my employment gap. When the call came offering me a position as a paralegal specialist with a focus on complex estate cases, Claire and I celebrated with champagne in my new townhouse. To Ruby 2.0, Claire toasted stronger and wiser than ever. I couldn't have predicted that exactly as I was rebuilding my life, Brad would be returning to discover the consequences of his actions. After 2 months in Florida with his girlfriend, Brad returned to Chicago, likely expecting to find me desperate and defeated. Instead, he discovered our family home listed for sale and my belongings gone. His first inkling that his carefully constructed exit strategy might be unraveling came when a process server approached him in the parking garage of his firm's downtown offices. "Brad Harmon?" the young woman asked, clipboard in hand. "Yes, that's me," he replied, distractedly checking emails on his phone. "You've been served," she stated professionally, handing him a thick envelope of legal documents. Inside was my divorce filing prepared by Judith's team with my extensive input. Unlike the simple no-fault divorce Brad had likely anticipated handling through his firm's family law department, these papers detailed claims of financial abandonment, fraudulent transfer of marital assets, and deliberate financial abuse. Attached were copies of Brad's text message bank statements showing the drained accounts and transcripts of his damning phone call. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following week, with a request for immediate temporary support restoration of the joint account funds and a freeze on all assets pending full financial disclosure. Brad's furious phone call came within hours. "What the hell is this, Ruby?" he shouted when I answered. "Morrison and Klein, you went to my firm's biggest competitor. Are you trying to humiliate me professionally?" I remained calm, recording this conversation as well. "I went to an old friend who happens to be an excellent attorney. You left me without access to funds, Brad. What did you expect me to?" "This is ridiculous. You're claiming financial abandonment. I have every right to use my own money however I want." "Marital assets aren't just your money. 30 years of marriage created shared property. This will never hold up. I'll have it thrown out within days." "Then I guess we'll see each other in court next week," I replied, ending the call as he continued blustering. Brad demanded an emergency hearing, confident he could intimidate me or charm the judge. He arrived with his firm's senior family law partner, Stanley Goldman, expecting to quickly dismiss my frivolous claims. The shock on Brad's face when he saw me enter with Judith and 2 additional attorneys from her firm was visible across the courtroom. Gone was the submissive corporate wife in conservative dresses. In her place stood a professional woman in a tailored suit, hair stylishly silver head held high. "Your Honor," Brad's attorney began, "this filing is an emotional overreaction to a marital separation. My client has every intention of providing appropriate support once a proper accounting of assets can be completed. We request these emergency measures be denied as premature." Judith rose her reputation as one of Chicago's fiercest litigators preceding her. "Your Honor, we have documented evidence of deliberate financial abandonment and fraudulent concealment of assets. Mr. Harmon drained joint accounts of $157,000 without notice, canceled Mrs. Harmon's access to all credit cards, and has sold marital property without consent or disclosure, including a vacation home valued at $390,000. She presented the evidence methodically: the text message, the bank records, the recording of Brad's call, and documentation of the secretly sold cabin. Judge Patricia Hernandez, a no-nonsense jurist with 20 years on the family court bench, reviewed the evidence with growing consternation. When she looked up at Brad and his attorney, her expression was stone cold. "Mr. Goldman, is your client disputing these records? Did he or did he not empty jointly held accounts and terminate Mrs. Harmon's access to marital assets?" Brad's attorney conferred briefly with him before responding. "Your Honor, while certain financial adjustments were made, my client disputes the characterization of his actions as abandonment." Judge Hernandez was having none of it. "Mr. Harmon, this text message," she held up the printed copy, "appears to explicitly state your intentions. I've already drained our joint account, ha-ha." The ha-ha is particularly troubling to this court. Brad shifted uncomfortably. "It was poorly worded, Your Honor. I was emotional. Emotional enough to drain accounts and cancel credit cards, but not emotional enough to impair your financial planning," the judge observed dryly. "This court takes a very dim view of spouses who use financial control as a weapon, Mr. Harmon." particularly attorneys who certainly know better. Her ruling came swiftly and decisively. Brad was ordered to return the $157,000 to a court-supervised account within 48 hours. All his personal and business accounts were temporarily frozen pending full financial disclosure. He was required to restore my access to credit cards and provide $4,000 in immediate emergency support. Most significantly, Judge Hernandez ordered a complete forensic accounting of all marital assets, including any professional partnerships, offshore holdings, and recently sold properties. Furthermore, she added, fixing Brad with a stern look, this court is referring these matters to the Special Master for investigation of possible fraudulent conveyance and concealment of marital assets. These are serious matters that could potentially involve ethical considerations for an officer of the court. The reference to ethical considerations visibly alarmed both Brad and his attorney. As a practicing attorney, Brad was subject to State Bar Association rules of professional conduct. Fraudulent financial behavior in his personal affairs could potentially impact his professional standing. As we left the courtroom, Brad attempted to approach me, but Judith smoothly intercepted him. All communications through counsel from this point forward, she stated firmly. I caught a glimpse of Brad's face as we departed. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by something I'd rarely seen during our marriage, genuine worry. The ruling hit Brad in multiple ways. The court-ordered financial disclosures required him to reveal the offshore accounts and Florida condominium he'd hidden. The funds returned to the supervised account meant he and Brittany no longer had the lavish resources he'd promised her. Most devastating for Brad, his firm's partners became aware of the potentially embarrassing proceedings. His girlfriend left him, Megan reported during one of our weekly calls about a month after the hearing. Jason ran into Dad at his favorite steakhouse, said he was alone at the bar looking miserable. Apparently, Brittany went back to Florida without him when the money dried up. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only sadness at how thoroughly Brad had destroyed his life for such a fleeting relationship. The forensic accounting ordered by the court revealed far more than even I had suspected. Brad had been systematically diverting funds for over 5 years, building a separate financial life I knew nothing about. The offshore accounts contained nearly $800,000. The Tampa condominium, purchased in a business entity's name, had been bought with marital funds. Most damaging, the accountant discovered evidence of questionable billing practices that potentially constituted client fraud. Brad, recognizing his increasingly precarious position, attempted to settle quickly. His first offer was insultingly low, essentially the house equity and a small maintenance payment. He still doesn't get it, Judith observed when we reviewed the offer. He thinks you'll take anything to avoid a fight. He never really knew me, I replied. Not in 30 years of marriage. With Judith's guidance, we rejected the offer and countered with terms that recognized my contributions to the marriage and addressed the attempted financial abandonment. As Brad became more desperate to settle before the ethical issues reached the State Bar Association, his offers improved dramatically. The final negotiation session occurred 6 months after his fateful text message. Brad arrived looking noticeably aged, the confident attorney replaced by a haggard man in an ill-fitting suit. My client is prepared to offer a fair and equitable division of assets, his new attorney began. Our definition of fair has been laid out in our counterproposal, Judith responded, Mrs. Harmon will accept nothing less than what she is legally and ethically entitled to after 30 years of partnership. After hours of negotiation, we reached an agreement. I would receive 65% of all marital assets, including retirement accounts and the proceeds from the house sale. Brad would pay substantial alimony for 10 years. Most importantly to me personally, the settlement included a written apology from Brad for the manner in which he ended our marriage and his attempt to leave me financially destitute. When we signed the final papers, exactly 1 year after the text message that ended my marriage, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The wounded woman who had collapsed in tears reading her husband's cruel message had been replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and genuinely independent. As Brad prepared to leave after the signing, he paused beside me. "For what it's worth, Ruby, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." Looking into the aged face of the man I'd once loved beyond reason, I felt a complicated mix of emotions: lingering hurt, certainly, but also something unexpected, a kind of peace. "I hope you find whatever you're looking for, Brad," I said simply, and turned away to begin my new life in earnest. 2 years after Brad's devastating text message, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The paralegal position at Williams & Associates had evolved into a senior specialist role where I used my unique perspective to help other women navigate financially complicated divorces. "You understand what they're going through because you've been there," my supervisor commented during my performance review. "That combination of empathy and expertise is invaluable." My professional resurrection brought not just financial independence, but a sense of purpose I had missed during my years as Brad's wife. Using my experience to help other women avoid the financial pitfalls of divorce became deeply fulfilling work. Beyond my career, I founded a monthly support group called Starting Over After 50, providing both emotional support and practical financial literacy for women facing midlife transitions. What began as 6 women meeting in my townhouse living room grew to more than 30 members gathering in a community center space donated by a local bank. "Ruby saved my sanity," one member shared during our anniversary celebration. "When my husband of 28 years left, I thought my life was over. She showed me it was just beginning." Brad, meanwhile, had experienced a dramatic downward spiral. The ethical concerns raised during our divorce proceedings triggered a state bar investigation. While he avoided disbarment, the professional censure and required ethics monitoring made his position at the prestigious firm untenable. Last I heard, he had relocated to Milwaukee, working at a small practice for a fraction of his former income. Our children had processed the family rupture in their own ways. Megan remained my fiercest defender and had minimal contact with her father, especially after her daughter's first birthday, when Brad brought a new girlfriend nearly 40 years his junior to the celebration. "He just doesn't get it, Mom," Megan had fumed afterward. "He thinks he can replace one young woman with another, and everything will be fine. He's become a caricature of a midlife crisis." Jason's journey was more complicated. After initially maintaining contact with Brad, he gradually recognized the manipulation underlying his father's behavior. A breakthrough came when Brad suggested Jason use his connections to help a friend avoid consequences for a DUI. "Dad implied that rules don't apply to people like us," Jason told me during a visit. "It was like suddenly seeing the person he really is, not the father I thought I knew." Our family therapy sessions with Dr. Levine continued, though less frequently, helping us navigate the evolving dynamics of our restructured family. When Jason became engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Sarah, the question of Brad's role in the wedding brought our progress to the test. "I want him there because he's my father," Jason explained during a family session. "But I also want everyone to be comfortable, especially you, Mom. Your wedding should include the people who support your marriage and your values," I told him. "If that includes your father, I can handle it with grace." The settlement from my divorce, far more substantial than Brad had initially intended, provided long-term security. I established college funds for current and future grandchildren and donated a portion to a legal aid society serving women in financial crisis. I discovered joy in my new freedom. Claire and I took annual trips to destinations Brad had always dismissed as too adventurous or not our kind of place. Iceland, Portugal, Costa Rica, each journey expanding my world beyond the narrow confines of my former life. Most surprisingly, at 59, I found myself in a new relationship. Thomas, a widowed history professor I met through a community garden project, courted me with a refreshing respect for my independence and intelligence. "I admire how you rebuilt your life," he told me during our 5th date. "That kind of resilience is rare and beautiful." Unlike my relationship with Brad, This connection was built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Thomas listened when I spoke, valued my opinions, and never tried to control or diminish me. We moved slowly, both carrying histories that deserved respect, but the relationship added an unexpected dimension of joy to my reconstructed life. On the second anniversary of Brad's text message, I performed a private ritual of closure. I printed out the message that had devastated me, along with the final divorce decree and settlement agreement, and burned them in a small ceremony attended only by Claire and Dr. Levine. This represents the end of victimhood, I explained, as the papers turned to ash. From this moment forward, that text is just something that happened on my journey, not something that defines me. The most valuable lesson from my experience became the cornerstone of advice I shared with other women, both in my support group and in my professional role. Financial literacy and independence are essential regardless of how secure a marriage seems. Keep your own emergency fund, maintain your professional skills, and know where every account is located. I would counsel women contemplating marriage or already in long-term relationships. Love with your heart, but protect yourself with your head. I began writing a book, Text Message Divorce: How I Survived Financial Abandonment and Rebuilt My Life, sharing not just my story, but practical steps for women to protect themselves from similar experiences. The early manuscript attracted interest from publishers who recognized the unfortunately common nature of midlife abandonment. Looking back, I could now see the painful irony in Brad's actions. In trying to discard me with nothing after 30 years, he had inadvertently forced me to reclaim the strength, intelligence, and independence I had submerged during our marriage. His cruelty had ultimately freed me to become my authentic self. Sometimes, what looks like an ending is really a doorway became my personal philosophy words I shared with every new woman who joined our support group. At 60 years old, I had a fulfilling career, meaningful friendships, a loving family, financial security, and a promising new relationship. None of these would have been possible without the devastating text that Brad thought would destroy me. My story isn't just about surviving betrayal, but about the unexpected strength we find when we have no choice but to be strong. It's about trusting our instincts even when they're whispers beneath years of self-doubt. It's about recognizing that while we can't control how others treat us, we always have a choice in how we respond. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected growth? How did you rebuild your life after a significant loss? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey has inspired you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more true stories of resilience and transformation. And if you know someone who might need to hear that there's life, even a better life, after devastating loss, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worst moment doesn't have to define your future. The strongest people I know are those who found their power when they had no other choice.